Greetings to all. What I am going to talk about today is the classifications and principles of public expenditure. Let me start with some general information about public expenditure and aims and objectives of public expenditure. Public expenditure refers to the expenses incurred by the government for the maintenance of the government and to preserve the welfare of the society as a whole. Public expenditure refers to the government expenditure. It is incurred by the central and state governments. The public expenditure is incurred on various activities for the welfare of the people and also for the economic development, especially in developing countries. Public expenditure is not merely a financial mechanism, but it also aims at securing social objectives. Professor Dalton classifies the aims and objectives of public expenditure into two parts: security of human life against the external aggression and internal disorder and injustice, and promoting maximum social welfare of the community. I would like to move on to the next part, the classifications of public expenditure. The first classification is capital and revenue expenditure. Capital expenditure of the government refers to that expenditure which results in the creation of fixed assets. Capital expenditure is also known as development expenditure. For example, expenditure on agricultural and industrial development, irrigation, dams, etc. Revenue expenditure is also known as current or consumption expenditures. For example, expenditure on civil administration, defense forces, public health and education, etc. Development and non-development expenditure and productive and non-productive expenditure, all expenditures that promote economic growth, development are termed as development expenditure. Expenditure on infrastructure development, public enterprises or development of agriculture is bringing income to the government. Thus, they are classified as productive expenditure. Unproductive or non-development expenditure refers to those expenditures which does not yield any income. For example, expenditure on law and order, public administration do not create any productive asset which brings income to the government. Transfer and non-transfer expenditure. Transfer expenditure refers to those kind of expenditure against there is no corresponding transfer of real resources. For example, National Old Pension Scheme, subsidies, unemployment allowances, welfare benefits to weaker sections, etc. The non-transfer expenditure leads to that expenditure which results in creation of income or output. For example, power, transport, irrigation, education, health, family welfare, internal law and order, and defense, etc. Plan and non-plan expenditure. The plan expenditure is incurred on development activities outlined in ongoing 5-year plan. For example, expenditure is incurred on transport, rural development, communication, agriculture, energy, social services, etc. The non-plan expenditure is incurred on those activities which are not included in 5-year plan. It includes defense, subsidies, maintenance, etc. This leads me to my fifth point, which is grants and purchase price. This classification has been suggested by the economist Dalton. Grants. Grants are those payments made by a public authority for which there may not be any quid pro quo. For example, old age pension, unemployment benefits, and subsidies. Purchase prices. Purchase prices are expenditures for which the government receives goods and services in turn. For example, salaries and wages to government employees. Classification according to benefits. Common benefits to all. Expenditure that confer common benefits on all the people. For example, expenditure on education, public health, transport, defense, law and order. Special benefit to all. Expenditure that confers special benefits on all. For example, administration of justice, social security measures, community welfare, special benefits to some, expenditure that confer direct special benefits on those people. For example, old age pension, subsidies to weaker section, unemployment benefits. Dalton's classification of public expenditure, expenditure on public executives. Example, maintenance of traditional heads of states like the president, administrative expenditure to maintain the general administration of the country like government departments and offices, security expenditure to maintain armed forces and police forces, expenditure on administration of justice include maintenance of courts, judges, public prosecutors, development expenditure to promote growth and development of the country like expenditure on infrastructure, irrigation, etc. Social expenditures on public health, community welfare, social security, etc. Public debt charges include payment of interest and repayment of principal amount. The last classification is other classification. Mrs. Hicks classified public expenditure on salaries, defense equipment, wages, salaries of armed forces, Navy, Air Force, etc., civil expenditure. Government incurred this expenditure to maintain law and order, administration of justice, development expenditure. It is expenditure on development of agriculture, trade and commerce, transport and communication, etc. Next, we shift on to the principles of public expenditure. The principles of public expenditure are certain guidelines for the public authorities in spending government money. They are also known as canons of expenditure. These canons are the principle of maximum social advantage, canon of economy, canon of sanction, canon of elasticity, and canon of surplus. Now, I would like to give you an outline of each principles of public expenditure. The first principle of public expenditure is the principle of maximum social advantage. The objective behind this principle is that public money should be spent for general cause and must promote social welfare. It should not be spent for the benefit of a particular group of a society. Public expenditure should result in increased production, elimination of inequality, and promotion of welfare of all. It should secure internal peace and also protection from external aggression. Canon of economy. The authorities are expected to follow utmost economy in its expenditure. Public money should not be misused and not result in any wastage. Whether money is raised by taxation, public expenditure in turn should bring maximum benefit. It should not produce unfavorable effect on production. Canon of economy does not mean miserliness. It simply means that the prevention of extravagance and wastage of all kinds. Canon of sanction. Without the sanction of the public authority, no money should be spent. At the same time, the amount of money must be spent for the purpose for which it was sanctioned. This will ensure that waste and extravagance are avoided. There is proper audit done compulsorily. There is control and governmental supervision over public expenditure, and it is seen whether the expenditure has fulfilled the objective. It is the absence of proper sanction. There may be misuse of public funds. The Public Accounts Committee, established by every government, sees that these objectives are achieved. Canon of elasticity. This implies that there should be a scope for varying the expenditure according to need or circumstances. There should not be any rigidity in public expenditure. Let me elaborate further on the last principle of public expenditure is canon of surplus. The government expenditure should lead to increased production, employment and income. The expenditure should be within the revenue of the state. Deficit is permitted only for the short duration. In times of crisis, government is allowed to have deficit budget. The deficit must be good after the regularity returns. Finally, the expenditure should promote economic growth, stability, and social justice. Public expenditure should be directed to achieve economic and social objectives of the country. I hope you understand the topic related to the classifications of public expenditure and principles of public expenditure. Thank you.